Cersei Lannister knew darkness. She had spent her life learning to thrive within its borders, to shape it and wield it as her weapon. Yet as she stood upon the balustrade of Maegor's Holdfast, the dawn light crawling over the red roofs of King's Landing, even she could not quell the sense that something vast and ancient shifted beneath her feet. It had been a restless night, haunted by whispers, a memory of a promise her father made to her as a child, of secrets he kept locked away beneath the Red Keep, and of a key only she could wield. She remembered Tywin's words. There are truths hidden in stone, daughter, that could break a realm. And so she waited, watching the city stir, gold and crimson banners fluttering in the soft morning wind. Her mind, churning. The Iron Throne was hers, yet her hold was brittle, threatened by the Dornish in the south, the Tyrells from within, and rumors of a silver-haired dragon queen sailing from the east. What good was a crown, she thought, if it could be torn from your head with a single sword thrust? But what if, instead, she could place something between her and the world, something so terrible that no one would dare defy her? Qyburn had been the key. For all his necromantic arts and sibilant voice, he was a man who thrived on secrets, especially those left to fester. And now, as the city awakened, he waited in the gloom of her solar, clutching a parchment covered in faded Valyrian glyphs. He bowed low as she entered, the candlelight glinting on the chain about his neck. "It is as you suspected, Your Grace," he said, unrolling the parchment. "The passages beneath the Red Keep, the catacombs built by Maegor the Cruel, were not merely tombs. There are rooms sealed by dragonfire, doors only opened by Valyrian words. The Targaryens hid many things here, but the most precious were not their bones." Cersei's pulse fluttered. "How can you be certain?" He smiled, lips thin as spider silk. "There are tales, Your Grace. When Maegor took the throne, he used sorcery to bind his rule. He imprisoned traitors, yes, but also treasures, things he could not bear to lose or destroy. I believe he left living weapons." She leaned closer. "Dragons." Qyburn's eyes glittered. The last clutch, perhaps. Eggs, or even hatchlings left in darkness, waiting. Cersei let the words settle, heavy as iron chains. Dragons. The mere thought of them stirred the child within her, the girl who dreamt of monsters she could bend to her will. If Daenerys Stormborn brought fire and blood, Cersei would meet her with the ghosts of Valyria, ancient and terrible. "How do we find them?" she demanded, every syllable edged with hunger. "There is a passage," Qyburn whispered, "but it is not without peril. The doors have not been opened in 100 years. There are traps, wards. I do not care," she snapped. "Summon? Ready a cadre of my most loyal men. If there are dragons beneath my feet, I will see them with my own eyes." As the first bells rang for the day, Cersei descended into darkness with her company. Qyburn, Sir Gregor Clegane hulking like a shade in armor, black as a moonless night, and a half-dozen silent gold cloaks sworn to her alone. They passed through the dungeons, down spiral stairs slick with mold, past ancient doors inscribed with sigils of flame and wing, into the bones of the Red Keep itself. The air grew thick and cold. Torches sputtered. Shadows danced on the carved stone. They passed skeletons shackled to walls, remnants of Maegor's cruelty, and a door of black stone barred with gold, sealed by glyphs. Qyburn traced the symbols with a gloved finger. "Valyrian. Old magic. Allow me, Your Grace." He spoke the words, strange and musical, like a curse. The lock shuddered, and the door groaned open. Cersei braced herself and stepped through, not trusting any man to lead. The chamber beyond was vast, its ceiling vanishing into darkness. A stink of old death and something fouler, the sulphurous tang of dragon, clung to the air. Rivulets of water ran down the walls, feeding pools grown slick with algae. At the chamber's center rose an altar of black stone, and upon it, resting in a nest of pale bones and melted gold, were 3 great eggs, each the size of a man's head, their shells iridescent with colors unseen since the doom of Valyria. Her heart hammered. Here was power. Here was her answer. Sir Gregor moved to stand watch as Qyburn knelt beside the altar, running trembling hands over the eggs. "They are dormant, but not dead," he said. "If the tales are true, Dragonfire, or blood can rouse them." Cersei felt the eyes of her guards upon her, suspicion and awe mingling. She drew her dagger, pricked her thumb, and let blood drip onto the nearest shell. For a moment, nothing. Then, heat. A thrum, low and hungry, shuddered through the stone. The shell pulsed, veins of crimson flickering beneath the scales. Qyburn laughed, wild and giddy. "It is working, Your Grace." The eggs shimmered, the air thick with scent of ash and storm. Cersei pressed both hands to the nearest shell, heedless of the pain. "Fire," she thought. "Let the world burn." Word spread swiftly. Qyburn's whispers filtered through the Red Keep. Strange fires beneath the ground, gold cloaks gone missing, the queen vanishing for hours at a time. Jaime confronted her, face pale and jaw clenched. "What madness is this, Cersei?" he demanded in her solar. "People are afraid. They say you've unleashed something in the crypts. That you..." She smiled. "Sweet as summer wine. What would you have me do, brother? Wait for Daenerys to burn us alive? She has dragons. Now, so do I." He stared at her, horror mingled with fascination. "If you cannot control them, I will." She cut him off. "They are mine. They belong to the crown." His hand lingered at his sword hilt. For a heartbeat she wondered if he'd draw it. But then he shook his head, defeated. "Be careful, Cersei. Dragons are no one's pets." But she was past caution. Each day she descended to the crypts, her blood feeding the eggs, her voice echoing off the black stone and old Valyrian words Qyburn taught her. And each day, the shells grew warmer, the flickers of life inside stronger. Her dreams filled with flame, winged shapes coiling through the sky, kings landing ablaze in golden fire, her enemies screaming as shadows swept the streets. She woke, trembling, longing for it to be real. The city trembled, a beast stirring beneath its streets. Rats fled the tunnels, and fishermen along the black water spoke of tremors shaking the banks. The High Septon sent word, urging the queen to cease her profanations. But she laughed and turned her guards on the faith, rounding up any who dared question her. One stormy night, the eggs cracked. It began as a tremor, a low, keening sound rising from the crypts, shivering the stones of the Red Keep. Cersei, roused from uneasy sleep, ran barefoot through the halls, her golden hair streaming behind her, Qyburn at her heels. In the chamber, the altar was bathed in fire. The first dragon emerged, a sinuous, black-scaled thing, eyes like coals, wings glossy as oil. It shrieked, rearing back, its breath kindling torches to life as it tested new lungs. The second followed, green as emerald. The third, a pale gold. Cersei fell to her knees, weeping with triumph. They were small, no larger than hounds, but they grew swiftly, greedily, devouring sheep and goats dragged from the city's pens. Qyburn guided them, whispering, feeding them blood and meat. The beasts imprinted on Cersei, following her with eyes ancient and cunning, snarling at any who dared approach. Rumor exploded across the city. The queen had dragons. The poor cheered, desperate for a protector against the storm they saw brewing from across the narrow sea. The lords of the realm gathered in the throne room, uncertain whether to kneel or run. In her chambers, Cersei held court with her monsters. She named them Viharagon, after the Black Dread, Myriax for her mother, and Goldflame, the brightest, for her own house. She wore them like jewels, letting their claws curl about her wrists as she paced, laughing as lords flinched. Jaime watched from a distance, torn between awe and fear. "You're playing with wildfire," he told her. She only smiled. "Wildfire burns the unworthy. I am the flame." The news reached Daenerys Targaryen as she stood on the deck of her flagship, the wind snapping her banners, dragons circling overhead. Tyrion brought the tidings, his face grave. "3 dragons, my queen." smaller, but growing, hatched beneath the Red Keep. Cersei has become a dragon herself, or so the city says. Dany's mouth tightened. They are abominations. She has no right. She will use them, Tyrion warned. To keep the city. She knows you come. She will burn the city herself before she lets you take it. Then Dany's hands curled into fists. Then we take her dragons, or we kill them. She sent ravens to her allies, Yara on the sea, the Dornish in the south, the Unsullied and Dothraki waiting on the plains. The siege of King's Landing began anew, but now the city had teeth. Dragons do not sleep. They lurked in the shadows of the Red Keep, winding through halls scorched black, shrieking at any who dared enter. The gold cloaks learned to fear the flutter of scaled wings, the gleam of slit-pupiled eyes in the dark. Goldflame was the fiercest, burning a thief alive in the Bailey one dawn as Cersei watched, savoring every scream. But the city grew restless. Food dwindled. So much went to the dragons, who demanded meat daily. The common folk muttered. The faith seethed, seeing blasphemy in every flick of the dragon's tails. In the throne room, the air was always hot. The marble cracked, the tapestries singed. Varagon perched above the iron throne, eyes watching all. Qyburn, tireless, devised methods to contain them. Chains of Valyrian steel, pits flooded with wildfire, rooms sealed with spells. But the dragons grew, cleverer each day, their hunger outpacing all attempts at control. Cersei remained unbowed. "Let them see," she said, voice hard as the steel beneath her feet. "Let them all see what it means to defy the lion." Her enemies drew near. The city was surrounded, ships blockading the bay, armies massed on the King's Road. Tyrion's voice echoed through the streets, promising clemency for any who opened the gates. The dragons roared in answer. The day of reckoning dawned blood-red. Daenerys rode Drogon, his shadow falling across the city like the doom of old. The Unsullied marched at her command, Grey Worm at their head. The bells rang in terror. Cersei stood atop the battlements, clad in gold and crimson, her dragons arrayed before her. They were larger now, great as horses, smoke curling from their nostrils, wings unfurling to blot out the sun. She felt the world narrow to a point. Her will against the world's. "Burn them," she whispered, and her dragons leapt skyward. Fire met fire above the city. Drogon screamed, flame pouring from his jaws. Goldflame dove to meet him, colliding in a fury of teeth and talons. Miriax wheeled, spewing green flame across the ranks of Unsullied, scattering men like wheat before a storm. Varagon circled the sept, scorching its domes. The city became a furnace. Walls melted, towers tumbled. The river boiled. Daenerys, high above, wept as she watched the city she meant to save turn to ash. Drogon tore at Goldflame, wings ripping, claws gouging out. But Cersei's dragons were wild and desperate, and they fought with a cunning born of darkness. Below, the people screamed. Bells rang, falling silent as fire gutted the towers. The Red Keep blazed. Cersei watched her kingdom burn, a fierce joy in her eyes. Let the world see, she thought. Let them remember the day they feared the lion's roar. By nightfall, the city was in ruins. Drogon, wounded but triumphant, limped above the devastation, Daenerys sobbing atop his back. Varagon and Miriax had fallen, their bodies blackened hulks upon the shattered stones. Goldflame, half-blind and mad with pain, vanished into the city's burning heart. Cersei sat alone on the Iron Throne, the heat of the fire scorching her flesh, the roar of the dying city echoing through the halls. She smiled, tasting blood, her eyes alight with the reflection of dragon fire. The world would remember her. She knew, not as a queen, but as a force of nature, the last true dragon of King's Landing. Outside the flames raged, and somewhere beneath the ashes, gold flames stirred, the fire within undying. Wow. Ha. Something seems to have gone wrong. A.K. The ruins of King's Landing smoldered beneath a sky stained with smoke. Dawn crept slow and unwilling across the horizon, rays of sunlight filtering through ash clouds and illuminating the devastation below. What had been the greatest city in the realm now resembled the aftermath of a dragon's feast. Shattered towers, blackened streets, and rivers of soot where bustling markets once flowed. The stench of burnt flesh and melted stone clung to every corner, and the cries of the wounded drifted like ghosts through the ruins. Deep within the Red Keep, its stones cracked and weeping with heat, Cersei Lannister lingered on the Iron Throne. Her golden hair was scorched at the ends. Her skin blistered beneath a gown of blood-red silk. But her eyes burned with an unnatural light. She was not dead, though death stalked the city at every turn. And she was not afraid. The throne room, once echoing with courtiers' voices, was a hollow furnace now. The Iron Throne itself was half-fused, its barbs glowing faintly with retained heat from the inferno. Cersei sat as if welded to it, hands gripping the arms of the throne so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Her breaths came in shallow rasps. Smoke drifted through shattered windows. Ash fell like snow. Below, in what had once been the royal stables, Gold Flame lurked. The last of Cersei's brood, the dragon had crawled away from the carnage, wounds smoldering but far from mortal. Half-blinded, its great golden eye burned with madness and agony. It licked its wounds in the darkness, tail twitching amid the ruined stalls. Its body pressed close to the broken flagstones, as if drawing strength from the warm earth beneath. Now and again, it would lift its head and let loose a hoarse, shuddering bellow, a sound equal parts pain and rage, echoing through the shell of the city and announcing to all who remained that the lion's monster was not yet dead. Cersei's thoughts drifted between lucidity and dream. She saw visions in the flame. Her father's cold eyes, the contempt of Robert's drunken sneer, the faces of her children, Tommen, Myrcella, Joffrey, gone now, lost to the darkness. She remembered the green of wildfire, the gold of Lannister banners. She remembered the stories her nurse had told her, of dragons deep below the Red Keep, and the promise she had made herself in her girlhood. To rule, to be feared, to outlast them all. Yet now the world was ending around her, and her only companion was a wounded dragon and the memory of her own monstrous will. Outside the throne room, the remnants of the city's defenders gathered. A handful of Lannister guards, faces blackened, wounds hastily bound. Qyburn limped among them, his robes scorched, eyes wild with terror and fascination. Sir Gregor Clegane, if it was truly Gregor anymore, stood guard at the ruined doors, sword in hand. A titan turned wraith in the dim light. There was little left to defend. The Red Keep's towers were broken, the walls breached in a dozen places. Refugees clustered in the cellars and crypts, weeping, praying, cursing the queen who had promised them protection. The bells of the sept had melted and fallen, their voices silenced forever. Word reached Cersei as the sun crept higher. Daenerys was alive, riding her wounded dragon above the shattered city. The Targaryen queen's armies pressed closer each hour, led by Grey Worm and the last of the Unsullied, with the Northmen under Jon Snow camped outside the Gate of the Gods. Yara Greyjoy's ships still blocked the harbor, their banners snapping in the smoky wind. But the people of King's Landing looked not to the invaders now, but to the monster that still haunted their streets. Cersei heard them. Their terror was a balm. She summoned Qyburn. He arrived pale and trembling, but his voice was steady. "The city is lost, Your Grace. The lords are gone. The gold cloaks have abandoned their posts. The people are starving, dying. The Tyrells are dead, the Martells fled. Only the dragon remains." Cersei's lips curled. "Then we shall use it." Qyburn's eyes gleamed, greedy for knowledge even in ruin. "Gold Flame is weak, but not broken. If you command it, it will fight." "Then no. I want Daenerys Targaryen dead," Cersei said, voice hoarse but unyielding. "I want her burned to ash before she ever sets foot in my throne room." Qyburn bowed. "It shall be done, Your Grace. But there is a cost. Everything has a cost," she whispered, thinking of all she had lost already. Beyond the walls, Daenerys rode Drogon above the ruins, her heart a tempest of grief and fury. The great dragon's left wing was tattered and bloody, and burn marks striped his black scales where Gold Flame's fire had found its mark. Yet he still flew, each beat of his wings raising clouds of dust and ash from the city below. Tyrion stood beside Jon Snow on a bluff overlooking the Red Keep. His face stained with soot, his voice grim. She will not surrender. Not while she thinks she has a weapon left. Jon's eyes were cold. If she unleashes that dragon again, it will kill thousands more. Then we kill it first, said Grey Worm, stepping forward unsheathing his blade. Daenerys landed Drogon beside them, her silver hair tangled, her face streaked with tears and filth. The city is dying. We must end this. No more fire. Man, no. Tyrion placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. She will force your hand. Cersei never yields. Jon drew his sword, long claw gleaming. Then we take the Red Keep. Tonight. Night fell, thick and choked with smoke. Within the ruins of the royal stables, Qyburn worked his sorcery. He approached Gold Flame, bearing a bowl of blood. His own this time, sliced from his palm, mingled with rare black oils and flecks of gold leaf. He murmured in High Valyrian, words learned from forbidden texts, prayers twisted into commands. Gold Flame's great head lifted. Its tongue flickered out, tasting the air, tasting the blood. Its eyes narrowed to burning slits. Qyburn pressed the bowl to the dragon's snout, whispering, "Ben Beast. Burn them for your queen." The dragon drank, shuddered, then rose. Its wings stretching, tail thrashing, wounds weeping golden ichor. It stalked from the stables, flames leaking from its jaws, its hunger bound to Cersei's will. Cersei emerged from the Red Keep, crown askew, eyes fever bright. She raised a hand, bloodied and blistered. Gold Flame lowered its head. She pressed her palm to its snout, feeling the furnace heat beneath its scales. "Burn them all," she hissed. With a bellow, Gold Flame leapt skyward, wings beating the air. It rose above the ruins, flames spilling from its mouth, lighting the city anew. The people scattered, shrieking. Soldiers raised shields and spears, but the dragon was a storm. It dove, breathed, set barricades alight, shattered stone with its claws. The armies outside the walls surged forward, desperate to end the nightmare. Jon Snow led the charge through the ruined Lion Gate. Northmen and Unsullied at his side. Arrows hissed down from the battlements, but most defenders had fled or died. Fire rained from above, Gold Flame swooping low, its roar shattering the night. The heat was unbearable. Men burst into flame. Horses reared and bolted. Grey Worm darted through the chaos, leading his spearmen up a side street toward the keep. Tyrion and Davos followed, rallying the survivors. Everywhere, Gold Flame reigned, until Drogon's cry split the sky. Daenerys mounted Drogon one last time. She pressed her forehead to his, whispering, "No more death, my friend. End it." Drogon rose, wings straining, body racked with pain but filled with purpose. He soared above Gold Flame, his shadow stretching across the dying city. The two dragons circled, fire and ash spiraling between them. Gold Flame, maddened by pain and sorcery, struck first, rushing upward, jaws agape, flame belching forth. Drogon answered with his own fire, black and red, hotter than any forge. The blasts collided, washing the streets below with boiling heat. Men cowered in alleys, shielding their faces. Stones melted, windows shattered. High above, the dragons clawed and bit, wings slashing. Gold Flame was wild, but Drogon had fought before. He raked his talons across Gold Flame's scarred flank, blood pouring from fresh wounds. Gold Flame shrieked, twisting, catching Drogon's wing in its jaws. They plummeted, locked together, slamming into the shattered dome of the Great Sept. The impact shook the city. Cersei watched from the broken tower, heart pounding with terror and elation. "Kill her!" she screamed, her voice cracking. But the dragons would not listen. They were creatures of blood and fire. of fury and pain. They tore at each other, oblivious to their rider's will, fighting as their ancestors had once fought in the sky above old Valeria. Daenerys clung to Drogon, urging him higher, away from the ruin. Below, Gold Flame rose, wings trailing flame, eyes fixed on his rival. Jon Snow forced his way into the Red Keep, Longclaw in hand. He found the throne room aflame, the Iron Throne glowing red, Cersei upon it, like a corpse crowned in fire. "Cersei!" he shouted, striding forward, sword raised. She looked at him, blood leaking from the corner of her mouth, hair wild. "Come to kill me, bastard. You and your dragon whore?" "Ben Sawas." Jon's eyes were cold, his face a mask of ashen sorrow. "Your reign is over. Surrender." She laughed, a broken sound. "You think you can end this? Only fire ends fire." He advanced, but before he could reach her, the world shook. Gold Flame and Drogon crashed through the outer wall. Stone raining down. Cersei rose, defiant, eyes blazing. The dragons circled the throne room, flames flickering from their jaws. For a moment, Jon saw them. Drogon, battered but unbroken. Gold Flame, crazed and magnificent, both greater than any mortal queen. Cersei stepped forward, blood on her lips, arms wide as if to embrace them. "Burn me then, burn me if you dare." Jon watched in horror as Gold Flame obeyed, unleashing a torrent of fire that swept over the throne, over Cersei, over the room itself. The heat was like a god's hand, obliterating everything. Drogon shielded Daenerys, wrapping her in his wings, his scales charring but unbroken. Jon flung himself behind a fallen pillar, feeling his hair singe, his skin blister. When the fire faded, Cersei Lannister was gone. The Iron Throne was a twisted, melted wreck, the symbol of centuries of rule destroyed in an instant. Gold Flame stood in the wreckage, swaying, smoke rising from its nostrils. Then, with a final shudder, the great dragon collapsed, its wounds too grievous, its heart spent. Silence fell. The city's last dragon was dead. The dawn after the battle broke clear and cold. Ash fell in gentle flurries. The survivors picked through the ruins, searching for the living, honoring the dead. The Red Keep was a mausoleum of fire and loss. Jon Snow found Daenerys in the courtyard, leaning against Drogon's massive side. The dragon's wounds were bound, his breathing ragged but steady. Daenerys' eyes were hollow. "It's over," Jon said softly. She nodded. Nothing left to burn. They stood in silence, the ghosts of the city gathering around them. Tyrion found them, his limp more pronounced, his face drawn. "There are people left. Children. We must care for them." Jon nodded. "We will." They gathered the lords who remained, north and south, and set about the grim work of rebuilding. The Iron Throne was no more. The old order had been consumed in fire. The people, those who survived, looked to Daenerys and Jon, not with adulation but with hope. A hope for peace, for justice, for a world without dragons. As the days passed, Daenerys walked among the ruins, comforting the grieving, helping the wounded. She grieved for those lost, for the city she could not save, for the dragons who were now legends and memories. Drogon recovered, though he would never fly so high again. The people came to see him not as a weapon, but as a living symbol of a past that would not return. And beneath the city, in the quiet dark, something moved. A clutch of eggs, hidden deep in the bones of King's Landing, their shells faintly warm, waiting for a new age. But for now, peace reigned. The ashes settled, and from ruin, the survivors began to dream of something new. In the weeks after the burning of King's Landing, the city became a graveyard and a womb. Blackened crows circled the jagged spires of the Red Keep, the once proud fortress now stripped and gutted, windows gaping, halls slick with soot. The Iron Throne, nothing more than a molten smear of steel and splintered swords, lay half buried beneath a mountain of stone and ash. The scent of death faded slowly, replaced by the sour tang of hope and hunger. Jon Snow woke before dawn each morning. He found himself drifting through the city's ruins, Longclaw at his side, his boots leaving prints and powdery soot. There were always tasks. The Northmen, led by Sir Davos, and a weary Tormund, cleared streets and ferried water from the Blackwater, breaking ice each morning from the buckets as autumn pressed hard into early winter. The unsullied, loyal to Grey Worm's quiet fury, kept order, their discipline a cold comfort in a city still trembling from its ordeal. Everywhere Jon went, eyes followed, some hollow with loss, some burning with blame, some lit with the fragile flame of faith. He heard their stories. Mothers whose children had vanished in the inferno, gold cloaks turned beggars, bakers who had never known war until fire poured from the sky. He listened in silence, shoulders bowed, always conscious of the weight of blood on his hands, though it was not his fire that had destroyed them. Daenerys too walked among the survivors. She came without guards, her silver hair cropped short after the flames had claimed the rest. She wore the plain leathers of a Dothraki rider. Her face unpainted, eyes rimmed red from grief. The people shied away at first, some crossing themselves, but she stopped for every plea, every weeping child, every crippled man. She shared what food she had. She let them touch Drogon's scales, rough as iron and warm beneath the sun. The dragon watched with dark eyes, fierce and patient, bearing his scars like medals. Tyrion Lannister, gaunt and limping, spent his days with the city's scribes. He read lists of the dead and missing, scrawled new plans for aqueducts, watched as masons patched the few walls still standing. He rarely drank now, though sometimes, when the bells tolled for funerals, he sat atop the ruined tower and stared into the river, a small flask cradled in his hand. On the seventh day, as the sky bled with the light of a false dawn, a column of riders appeared on the horizon. At their head rode Arya Stark, her hair wild, her eyes cold as river ice. She came with a ragged band of Northmen and a few knights of the Vale, news from the countryside, where Lannister and Targaryen loyalists fought small, bloody wars in shattered villages. She found Jon on the steps of the Red Keep, watching the sunrise flicker through shattered glass. "They won't forgive you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not for what happened here. Not for what Daenerys did." "I know," Jon replied, not looking at her. "But they don't have to. Only the living matter now." Arya studied his face, searching for some sign of the boy she'd once known. "You're not their king, Jon. You never wanted this." Jon shook his head, exhausted. "I want peace. That's all." They watched the city together, two ghosts on the edge of the world. Beneath the city, in tunnels black as memory, scavengers hunted. Some searched for treasure, Lannister gold, Tyrell rings, even old dragon bones. Others sought shelter, hiding from the New Order. Few returned. Those who did spoke of shadows that moved against the flicker of torches, the hot smell of sulfur, and the echo of a dragon's breath where no dragon should be. One night, a boy named Tomlin slipped away from his mother's makeshift tent in Flea Bottom, clutching a broken lantern. He was thin and hungry, and dreamed of finding a jeweled crown among the rubble, something to buy his way out of the ashes. He crept into the tunnels, following a warm current of air, and soon found himself deeper than he had ever dared go. He saw bones, old and new, rats and men, birds and something larger, scaled. He heard a heartbeat, slow and immense, echoing through the stone. The lantern guttered, but in the darkness he glimpsed something marvelous. 3 eggs, large as hounds, nestled in a bed of ash and gold, their shells veined with crimson and silver. The heartbeat grew louder, a promise and a warning. He reached out to touch one, but a hiss, low and sharp, froze him in place. From the darkness, a pair of gold eyes blinked open, and a shape as large as a cart shifted in the gloom. The boy screamed and ran, dropping his lantern. He told no one, but the dreams came every night, of wings unfolding, of fire stirring beneath the earth. In the great hall, Jon and Daenerys called a council. Tyrion presided, Davos at his side, Arya and Grey Worm flanking the room. The lords of Westeros trickled in, some in battered finery, others in armor still streaked with soot. Sansa came from Winterfell, her face proud but grave, the weight of her house settling around her shoulders. Robin Arryn, taller and gaunt, watched from behind her, and Gendry, Baratheon now, filled the hall with the presence of the Stormlands. The hall was silent as Jon stood. "Westeros is broken," he said. "The crown is gone. The Iron Throne is ash. We can fight over what's left, or we can build something new. The choice is yours." "Men?" Daenerys stepped forward, her voice carried, unbroken by grief. "I do not claim the throne, not after what I've done. I came to free the people from tyranny. But I brought only ruin. Let the lords choose. Let the people choose. If we must have a queen or king, let it be one who knows what this city has suffered." Tyrion's eyes flickered. "There is a precedent. Great councils, as in the days of old. The lords paramount, the faith, the people. Perhaps it is time we followed it, not with fire, but with reason." And no. There were grumbles, threats, bargains whispered, but in the end, Sansa's words swayed them. No one will ever kneel again to a dragon, nor to a lion. If there is a ruler, let it be someone who will kneel first to the people. The first election in Westeros history began. There were no banners, no horns, only voices, low and trembling, casting their lot not for blood, but for hope. Jon was named, and Daenerys, and Sansa, and even Gendry. Tyrion declined, laughing. "If you want a kingdom built on wit and wine, you may as well make a jester your king." In the end, the choice was made. Sansa Stark, queen in the north, and now queen of Westeros, chosen for her cool head, her loyalty, her wisdom. Jon knelt to her, as did Daenerys, who wept as she pressed her brow to Sansa's hand. "There is no more fire," Sansa said, voice ringing in the ruined hall. "We are all ashes. Let us begin again." In the weeks that followed, the city transformed. The Unsullied set sail, many returning to Nith, where peace might be possible. The Dothraki melted away into the countryside, wild and ungovernable, but less inclined to raid with winter's approach. Tyrion became hand to Sansa, much to his own surprise, and Davos was named Lord of Ships. Arya lingered only long enough to see her siblings crowned and honored, then disappeared westward, chasing the edge of the world. Jon lingered as well, though every day he looked north, toward a land that would never let him go. Daenerys asked him to stay, but he shook his head. "I was never meant for a crown, nor a city of stone. My place is where the cold wind blows." "Then shall." Daenerys smiled through her sorrow. "Find peace, Jon Snow." He found Ghost in the ruins of the Red Keep, the direwolf's fur grayed with ash, but eyes bright with life. Together, they slipped out through the broken walls one dawn, heading north, leaving behind the city and its burdens. Daenerys remained, not as queen but as protector. She walked the city each day, healing when she could, teaching the orphans who gathered around Drogon's lair. She was legend now, a living scar on the memory of the realm, and she bore it with dignity. Drogon recovered slowly, his flight more labored, his fire diminished, but he watched over her as faithfully as Ghost watched Jon. Some whispered that the age of dragons was ended, that Westeros would know no more fire from the sky. But deep below the city, in the dark where secrets are born, the eggs waited. Rumors grew of strange heat in the crypts, of candles that melted on their own, of the heartbeat that echoed through the stones on sleepless nights. One night, Daenerys dreamed of fire. Not wild, not cruel, but gentle and warm. A light that banished shadows. She awoke and felt the pull of old magic, the call of her blood. She followed it, torch in hand, down into the darkness beneath the Red Keep, past ruined doors and shattered sigils, through air thick with dust and memory. She found the chamber where the eggs slept. They glowed faintly in the gloom, their colors shifting, alive. She knelt, laying her palm on the largest, feeling the thrum of life inside. "Not yet," she whispered. "The world is not ready for you. Not until we have built something worth your fire." She rose, sealing the door behind her, leaving the eggs to their long sleep. Above, the city of King's Landing stirred. The bells rang for a new queen, not of fire and blood, but of winter and hope. The Red Keep stood, wounded but unbroken, watching over a people who had learned to fear dragons, and perhaps to forgive them. And so, beneath the weight of ash and the promise of dawn, Westeros began again. The memory of fire lingered, as all memories do, waiting to be called forth when the world needed it most. But for now, there was peace. For now, there was the gentle, stubborn work of rebuilding, and the hope that from ashes, something brighter might yet arise. Okay. Winter settled into King's Landing with a gentler hand than the one that had broken it. Snow fell over the ruins, muting the scars of dragonfire, turning blackened streets and splintered towers into drifts of ghostly white. On the wind, the city's survivors could almost believe the past was being covered over, that the world was granting them one more chance to begin again. In the Queen's solar, Sansa Stark sat in council. Light slanted through a window, painting dust motes gold and silver. The room, though battered, was filled with the scents of new parchment and old stone. Warmth from a crackling fire and something sweet. Apples roasting on the hearth, a comfort from the north. Tyrion sat at her right, a fresh map unrolled on the table. Sir Davos read letters aloud in his slow, careful voice, most of them written in shaky script. Appeals for food, requests for justice, the endless grief of a people, unmoored from the world they had known. Sansa listened, pen poised, her eyes drifting to the city beyond. The docks thrived again, ships coming up from Old Town with salted cod and casks of honey. The Sept was still in ruins, but children played in its bones, their laughter echoing over broken stones. She had declared the Riverlands and Crownlands tax-free for 3 years, and the North sent wheat by wagon, a gesture she hoped would foster something like unity instead of fear. It was a start, but only a start. Tyrion paused in his work, watching her with the tired affection of an old friend. "Your Grace," he said, "word from the Reach. House Redwine offers their fleet in exchange for trading privileges. They wish to rebuild their lost vineyards, and have asked if you'll pardon any small folk who fled the fighting. Tell them yes, and to send 10 casks of their best." Sansa replied, a small smile quirking her lips. Westeros could use a celebration. Sir Davos shifted, the lines on his face deepening. "A rider from Dorne came last night. Prince Maelon says his lords will recognize your rule. They want peace. They want their dead returned. They'll have it," she said. "No more war. Not in my lifetime." The council adjourned at noon, and Sansa walked alone to the Godswood. A small, charred grove now, but alive. The heart tree had survived, blackened but stubborn, and red sap beaded its trunk like tears. She pressed her palm to the bark, whispering prayers for her father, for Robb, for Bran and Arya, wherever her siblings roamed. A rustle of snow signaled Tyrion's approach. He paused at the edge of the clearing, his breath white on the air. "You're doing well," he said. "It will never be enough for some," she replied, "but we must keep trying." He nodded. "That's all we ever can do." Together, they watched the city shift beneath its mantle of snow. Smoke drifted from 1,000 hearths. The sound of hammers echoed from the old armory, where former soldiers now forged plows and nails. Somewhere nearby, a group of orphans sang an old river song, their voices hopeful and off-key. "We're not the same people who started this war," Sansa said. Tyrion's eyes crinkled with something like pride. "We're what the realm needs." South of the city, Daenerys Targaryen stood on a ridge, looking down on the black water. Drogon crouched beside her, wings folded tight, tail curling around his body for warmth. She wore a cloak of plain wool, her hair braided simply. For months, she had resisted the pull of the city, choosing to help in the outskirts, teaching, healing, building. She planted apple trees where fields had burned, taught the children to read by firelight, and listened to stories of old queens and braver days. but her nights belonged to dreams. Fire haunted her, even as peace returned to the land. The eggs in the crypts whispered to her in sleep, promising a second chance, a kinder reign. She resisted them, fearing her own blood, but the dreams grew insistent. 3 eggs, pulsing with heat, beneath the stones of a city that both loved and hated her. It was Arya who found her, one cold morning, as Daenerys walked the river's edge. "They're asking for you in the city," Arya said. "The orphans want to see the dragon again. The bakers say they'll name a pie after you if you come." Daenerys smiled, her sadness lingering in her eyes. "Will you walk with me?" They wandered in silence, Arya's boots crunching over frost, Daenerys' cloak billowing in the breeze. After a while, Arya spoke. "You saved them, you know. In your way, you burned the old world, so something better could grow." "Fire is never gentle," Daenerys replied, her voice soft. "Not even when it means to be." Arya shrugged. "Neither is winter, but spring follows." They walked until the city walls loomed ahead, and Daenerys felt the old fear, the sharp stab of memory. But as they crossed the broken gates, she was met with cheers, not jeers. A cluster of children ran to her, tugging her hand, pulling her toward the square where Drogon basked in the snow. A living legend who allowed them to climb over his tail and feed him scraps of roasted mutton. Daenerys sat with them, telling stories of old Valyria, of the dragons that once ruled the skies. She wove tales of mercy and courage, planting seeds she hoped would grow into something gentler than fire. Far below, in the deepest crypts of the Red Keep, Qyburn's old passages remained unexplored. The collapse of the throne room had buried the entrance beneath tons of stone, but Daenerys felt the pull each time she stood above. At night, she dreamed of heat radiating upward, of scales gleaming beneath candlelight. Sometimes she woke with her palms warm, her breath steaming. It was Tyrion who, months later, uncovered the way. Clearing debris with a team of workers, they broke through into a vault lined with dragon skulls. The air was thick with the scent of old magic. By torchlight, Daenerys and Tyrion found the 3 eggs, each nestled among bones and broken crowns. They glowed faintly, their colors shifting. One red as blood, one deep gold, one silver blue. Tyrion knelt beside them, awed. "The world is not ready for more dragons." "No," Daenerys agreed. "But perhaps one day, when it is." They resealed the vault, posting trusted guards. The secret would live on, passed to those who would protect it. Not as a weapon, but as a promise. Seasons turned. The city healed. Wheat grew in the riverlands, grapes on the arbor, and the snows in the north receded with the spring. Trade resumed. Sansa's reforms took root. Women became magistrates. Small folk sat on councils, and for the first time in living memory, the harvest fed all, not just the highborn. Jon Snow returned once, riding through the gates on a gray horse, Ghost at his side. He carried word from the wall, peace with the wildlings, the forests regrowing, the Night's Watch reformed as rangers and guides for all, not just crows in black. He met Sansa in the Godswood, their words soft, full of laughter and memory. "You've done it," he said. "You've made something better." Sansa smiled, her eyes wet. "We did it. All of us." Nandao. He visited Daenerys too, finding her among the children. They spoke little, but he held her hands. And in that moment, the old wounds faded, replaced by gratitude, forgiveness, something more lasting than regret. That night, as Jon rode north, a great cheer rose from the city, echoing across the river. In the ruins of the old sept, children lit candles, spelling out the word hope in the snow. As spring returned, Arya came home for a single day. She brought with her stories of islands beyond the western seas, of tall ships and wild storms. She stayed only long enough to plant a white rose in the Godswood, a promise to return. Tyrion found Sansa at dusk, watching the sunset from the walls. "Will it last?" she asked. He shrugged. "Nothing ever does. But this is a good beginning." They stood in silence as the sky blazed gold and red. The city below them, a tapestry of life. Beneath the stones, In the old vault, the dragon eggs slept. Sometimes, when the night was very quiet and the wind shifted, the guards swore they could hear faint thudding, like a heartbeat. They wondered if it was the city itself, or something older, deeper, waiting. Sansa wrote a decree. The vault would remain sealed for 100 years, to be opened only by the will of the council and the people. A promise of power, held in trust for those who came after, if ever dragons were needed again. The people rebuilt their lives, sowed seeds in gardens where bones had lain. Old hatreds faded, replaced by the ordinary work of living, baking, farming, loving, forgiving, and the city, reborn from fire and snow, flourished. Years passed. Generations grew up with tales of the dragons that nearly ended the world, and of the queens who chose peace instead of war. And every spring, on the day when the city's bells rang out in joy, children gathered in the square. Idle songs of fire, hope, and the day king's landing chose to rise. Above them, Drogon wheeled once in the sky, a shadow on the clouds, a living memory, and then was gone, leaving behind only the wind and the promise of dawn. Ka. The slow unfurling of spring painted the blackened city with cautious color. Buds emerged on the scorched limbs of the godswood. Green shoots thrust up through the fissured marble in the throne room, and market stalls bloomed along the rebuilt avenues, with banners of blue and green. Children's laughter chased the crows from the eaves of the old sept, and the sharp clang of hammer and anvil echoed from the repaired forges in the shadow of the Red Keep. In the harbors, gulls wheeled above ships coming in from Bravos and Old Town, their holds full of grain and saltfish, timber and saffron, promise and rumor. Sansa Stark, Queen of Westeros, walked through the city every morning, accompanied only by her sworn shield Brienne and the ever-present Tyrion Lannister. In the beginning, their presence had been a symbol: justice, wisdom, strength. But now, as the wounds of fire faded, their presence was habit, a comfort. Together they moved through markets, watched new walls being raised, listened to the grievances of stonemasons and seamstresses, and knelt to lift children up from the mud. Sansa's voice was known to the butchers and the bakers, to the cobblers and the street urchins, and she wielded it with a quiet, persistent authority that cut through the city's sorrows like a north wind through morning fog. Tyrion was more at home here than he had ever been in the golden halls of Casterly Rock or the stifling courts of old. He had found his purpose in these broken streets, mediator, scribe, tutor, to the Queen's growing court of children. He delighted in questions, delighted even more in the small mischiefs that kept council meetings lively. Westeros, he remarked one morning to Brienne as they watched Sansa haggle with the baker, was made for clever women and fools. If it weren't for us, the lords would still be killing each other over bits of iron and pride. Brienne smiled. Her own scars faded but unforgotten. Perhaps they still are, my lord. But now they know someone is watching. Now. Word had spread of the Queen's daily walks, and soon delegations from every corner of the realm appeared at the city's gates. Lords and ladies of the Reach with baskets of apples, Ironborn with barrels of herring and rum, the Prince of Dorne with a chest of saffron and silk. Sansa accepted every gift with a promise and a warning: peace would be honored, but never again would any one house rule through fire. The crown would answer to council, and the council to the realm. It was a new world, uncertain and fragile. But it was theirs. Not all were content. In the ruins of the old dragon pit, a ragged handful of fanatics gathered nightly, calling for vengeance against the She-Wolf Queen and the silver-haired usurper. Some sought to raise new banners, but found little appetite for war. The city's memory was long, and the scars of dragonfire ran deep. In the months that followed, the vault beneath the Red Keep became legend. Rumors swirled about what treasures or terrors were hidden there. Tyrion let them grow, better fear of the unknown than a race for forgotten power. The truth was shared only among the Queen's closest council: Daenerys, Sansa, Tyrion, Brienne, and Davos. The dragon eggs slept undisturbed, guarded by a company of the most loyal gold cloaks, and a handful of trusted Unsullied who had remained behind as stewards of peace. Daenerys visited the vault, but rarely. She spent most of her days in the outskirts of the city, at a small orphanage she had established with the help of Gendry Baratheon. The orphans adored her. She was taller than most, with strange, gentle eyes, and a fierce kindness that sometimes broke their hearts. She taught them to ride, to read, to hope. When she smiled, it was as if the sun itself had returned. Drogon, her great black companion, became a legend of his own. He nested in the green hills outside the city, sometimes circling the city's walls at dusk, a silent, gliding shadow that reminded all who saw him that power need not be cruel. No one tried to hunt or chain him. His presence brought no fear, only awe. He hunted in the wild, soared the open sky, and at Daenerys' call, returned to her side. One late afternoon, as spring's first storm broke over the city, Daenerys stood with Sansa atop the repaired battlements of the Red Keep. Lightning flashed above the Blackwater, rain fell in silver sheets, and the city glistened beneath its cleansing. "We will never be loved by all," Daenerys said, her voice nearly lost in the wind. "But I have learned it is enough to be needed." Sansa nodded, her face calm. "There is peace for now. That is more than most queens ever managed." Then shall. They stood together in silence as thunder rolled, the storm cleansing not just the city, but the wounds of old hatreds, if only for a night. That night, Tyrion dreamed of a feast in the throne room, laughter echoing from every arch. He woke before dawn, smiling for the first time in years. In the months that followed, the Great Council convened twice, once to settle the division of old lands, and once to rule on the new inheritance law that gave daughters equal claim to sons. It was not a popular measure among the older lords, but the small folk, the merchant guilds, and the city's women cheered. Sansa presided over the debates, her voice measured, her patience legendary. She accepted victories and defeats with the same calm. "We are writing the future," she told her council. "It will not be perfect, but it will be ours." Daenerys was asked to join the council, and she accepted with humility, offering advice on peace, justice, and the burden of power. She declined all titles. "A queen in name only," she joked, "and that is well enough for me." Arya's letters came from the far west, full of wonder and longing. She wrote of islands where the sun never set, of beasts the size of castles, of peoples who had never heard of dragons or winter. Her words were a tether to the wild, a reminder that the world was wide, that peace was a beginning, not an end. Gendry ruled Storm's End with a sure hand, his counsel as rough as his manners. He visited King's Landing often, laughing with Tyrion, sparring with Brienne, blushing furiously when Daenerys teased him in front of the court. He became a favorite of the people, known for settling disputes in person, sometimes with a mug of ale in hand. Jon Snow sent word from the far north. The wildlings had rebuilt their homes, peace had settled beyond the wall, and the snows had begun to recede. He wrote rarely, but when he did, his letters were filled with news of Ghost and the old gods, of stars brighter than any crown. 1 year to the day after the fire, the city celebrated the Festival of Rebirth. Banners hung from every window. Cakes were baked in the shape of wolves and dragons, and the people crowded the streets, singing and dancing. Sansa opened the gates of the Red Keep to all, and Daenerys, dressed in white, led a procession of orphans through the city, Drogon flying low overhead, trailing a banner of smoke that spelled the word, "Hope in the sky." At sunset, Sansa stood atop the walls, looking out over the city she had saved. Tyrion and Brienne flanked her, Davos and Gendry among the crowd below. Daenerys joined her, the wind tugging at her hair. Together, they watched as the people set lanterns afloat on the Blackwater, each flame a memory for the dead, a promise for the living. "There will be troubles," Tyrion said softly. "There always are." "There will," Sansa agreed. "But there will also be mornings, and laughter, and peace. We will endure." As darkness fell, the city below glowed with the light of 1,000 lanterns, drifting like stars upon the water. Far below, in the vault, the dragon eggs warmed beneath their stones. The city slept, guarded by dreams and by hope. And for the first time in memory, King's Landing was at peace. A soft, almost golden warmth came to rest over King's Landing as the second spring after the fire swept in from the Reach. The city was no longer a smoldering wound, but a half-healed tapestry. Its patchwork of soot and stone brightened with bursts of new life. Willow green, blush pink, and the defiant blue of river bells blooming in abandoned courtyard. Smoke from forges curled upward, mixing with the scents of baking bread and sea salt drifting from the markets. The battered red keep loomed, scarred and proud, its battlements rebuilt stone by stone, an enduring crown over a realm that still whispered with old fears and new dreams. Sansa Stark awoke before dawn most days. Her chambers looked east, over the city's haphazard rooftops, where banners stitched with the direwolf and the golden lion snapped above bakeries and barbers' shops. She walked the parapets in the first light, wrapped in a simple cloak, hair plaited in the northern style. Brienne followed at a respectful distance, her own presence a comfort that Sansa no longer questioned. Beyond the Queen's Gate, laborers gathered to repair a collapsed bridge. Sansa watched their progress, listening to the hammer's rhythm, imagining she could measure the city's healing by the speed of their work. It was Tyrion who met her at the end of her circuit, a scroll in one hand, his expression half amusement, half irritation. "The Archmaester of Old Town," he said, waving the parchment, "wishes to send a delegation of learned men to survey the ruins of the Sept. They want to determine whether it was dragons or..." He glanced sidelong at Sansa, lowering his voice to a parody of secrecy. Wildfire that did the greater harm. Sansa laughed softly, grateful for the banter. "Tell them they may survey as they wish, so long as they do not claim a single stone or relic for themselves." "And the Grand Septa?" Tyrion asked. "She's already posted a notice declaring the entire hill to be holy ground. Let them bicker over bones and ashes," Sansa said, her tone gentle. "As long as the living are fed." They set out together through the city. Fishermen nodded from beneath the arches of the mudgate. Women waved from windows, hair bound in bright scarves, the faces of children pressed to glass. The baker's son pressed a warm loaf into Sansa's hand and blushed crimson when she thanked him by name. 100 small courtesies, 1,000 daily mercies. This, Sansa knew, was the true labor of peace. Brienne cleared a path ahead as they approached the square. At its center, Daenerys stood beneath a rebuilt archway with a cluster of children and 3 young women of flea bottom. They listened as Daenerys spoke, her voice clear, weaving a lesson out of memory and legend. The long-lost fields of Valyria, the first market at Dragonstone, the way a city could survive if its people learned to forgive. When she saw Sansa, Daenerys' smile was slow and genuine. "The children have been asking about wolves," she said. "I told them how your ancestors built the first walls to keep out the cold." Sansa knelt beside the group, brushing her fingers over a child's unruly hair. "And the first thing they built inside those walls," she said, "was a garden." The children, all angles and open mouths, peppered her with questions. About dragons, about the North, about the promise that no one would ever again go hungry in King's Landing. "We keep our promises here," Sansa told them, meeting Daenerys' gaze, "no matter what." Later that morning, Sansa and Daenerys sat together beneath a blossoming almond tree at the edge of the Godswood. The ancient heart tree, scarred by fire but alive, spread its branches above them, red sap glistening on the bark. Daenerys plucked a petal and let it fall. "You were right, you know. There can be peace. Sometimes I still doubt it, but look at them." She gestured toward a band of children chasing one another around a carved bench, their shrieks bright in the morning air. "They play as if nothing was ever lost. They are wiser than we are," Sansa replied. "They know only what we show them. Let them learn joy instead of fear." The city's bells rang out. The first time in a year they had sounded for something other than mourning. In the market square, bakers passed out sweet buns shaped like wolves and dragons. Tyrion and Davos presided over a contest for the best story told by a child under 10, awarding small prizes and roaring laughter. Drogon was seen that afternoon, his great wings casting shadow over the fields south of the city. The people watched with neither terror nor awe, but quiet acceptance. He belonged to the land now, a warden against the dark. Some swore he slept in a cave by the Blackwater Rush. Others claimed he visited the ruins of Valyria each year. But all agreed that as long as peace held, Drogon would never bring fire to the city again. That night, a storm swept up from the sea. The wind rattled shutters and rain lashed the Red Keep, yet inside the council chamber the fire burned warm and the talk was light. Gendry Baratheon slouched beside the hearth, boots muddy and hair wild, having ridden from Storm's End to present his proposal for a new bridge at the Mud Gate. Sansa listened patiently as he described how his smiths would use the melted remnants of the old Sept spells for the bridge's supports. "It'll hold, your grace, stronger than any stone, and every time it rings folk will remember." He grinned, rubbing his neck. "Not just what was lost, but what we built after." Arya's letter arrived on a salt-stained scrap. Her hand rough and hurried. "Beyond the sunset, the stars are different, and I miss home. Tell Jon I am well. Tell Bran the trees here whisper too. I will return when the world no longer needs me to wander." Sansa kept the letter beside her bed. Tyrion drank a little more than usual, his laughter echoing over the council's business. "If the worst thing that happens in this city is a bridge built of bells and memory," he declared, "then I'll call it a reign well spent." When the meeting ended, Sansa found herself alone in the hall with Daenerys. The former queen turned counselor ran her fingers along the carved arm of her chair. "Do you ever think about the eggs?" she asked, voice low, just above the thunder outside. Sansa nodded. "Every day. I fear what they might bring." "And now? And hope?" Daenerys asked, searching her face. Sansa hesitated. "Perhaps hope most of all, but the world needs time. Let them sleep a little longer." Daenerys smiled sadly. "So do I." The vault beneath the Red Keep was watched over by 4 trusted guards. No one approached it without Sansa's seal, not even Daenerys. Yet word of the eggs trickled through the city in the form of stories. The children's tales that grew each time they were told. There was the tale of a baker's daughter who baked bread so good it lulled the sleeping dragons for another 100 years. And the one about the orphan who stole a scale for luck and used it to win a race across the city's rooftops. On nights when the wind shifted, the guards swore the stones above the vault felt warm to the touch. Some said it was the heart of the city, others that it was the memory of fire itself. Jon Snow returned on the first truly warm day of spring, his cloak travel-stained, his face marked by sun and wind. Ghost trotted beside him, bigger and shaggier than ever, his tongue lolling. He knelt to Sansa, clasping her hands, eyes bright with relief and sorrow. "The North remembers, your grace, and the wall holds. There's peace beyond the snows." She embraced him fiercely, blinking away tears. "Stay as long as you like. This is your home too." He shook his head. "It's yours, but I'll rest a while." Jon met with Daenerys beneath the heart tree, their words few but honest. She told him of the eggs, the peace, the children. He told her of wildlings farming beneath the aurora, of peace that held because men and women remembered what fire could do. For a time, old wounds faded. Ghosts chased the orphans through the godswood. Arya's letter was read aloud at dinner, and the city felt more whole than it ever had. On the last night of Jon's visit, a feast filled the old throne room. Lanterns swung from the ceiling, casting colored light over a crowd of city folk, lords and ladies mingling freely. The tables sagged with food. River trout and honey cakes, oat bread, wheels of sharp northern cheese. Gendry danced with a merchant's daughter. Tyrion told stories until his voice gave out. Davos argued gently with a Septon about the best way to pickle herring. Sansa stood at the dais and raised her cup. "To the realm rebuilt, and to the hope that our children will only know dragons in song." Her voice carried, met by cheers and the clatter of cups. Daenerys remained at her side, watching the crowd. "You kept your promise," she said. "You brought peace." Sansa shook her head. "We all did, even those who are gone. No. Above the city, as if in answer, Drogon wheeled across the face of the moon, a silent guardian. Years later, people would speak of this time as an age of gentleness and slow healing, when even the dragons slept and the heart of the realm beat steady and true. And in the vault beneath the Red Keep, warmth pulsed through 3 ancient eggs, a promise for another spring, another age, another story waiting to unfold. As the long days of spring matured into the promise of summer, King's Landing blossomed in ways that none living could remember. The sky above the city was unbroken blue, the river teemed with silver flash and laughter, and the bells rang not in alarm or mourning but in the cadence of weddings, festivals and the raucous chorus of markets, overflowing with new produce. Even the ruins that remained from dragonfire and war had become part of the city's renewal, arches now wrapped in flowering vines, hollowed stones serving as the stages for minstrels, children climbing rubble heaps as if they were castles built just for their games. In the Red Keep, Sansa Stark presided over a city transformed. Each dawn she walked her chambers, never allowing herself the softness of complacency. She read petitions from the provinces, oversaw trials where justice was swift but never cruel, and attended the Great Council, where voices once silenced by blood or gold now carried weight. Tyrion's wit became legend among the small folk. His jokes were repeated in every tavern and even at the foot of the Queen's table. Sir Davos, weathered and blunt, took charge of the city's docks and trades, his word the law among sailors and merchants alike. On this morning, Sansa met Daenerys beneath the ancient heart tree. It had taken years for the godswood to truly come back to life, but its stubborn green leaves shaded a patch of grass where they could speak without pretense. "You seem rested," Sansa said, her voice tinged with gentle teasing. "The children tell me you taught them how to braid a dragon's tail out of willow branches." Daenerys, in simple linen and boots caked with garden soil, smiled as she brushed petals from her lap. "They needed to know patience and how to care for something that grows wild." Sansa considered this. "We all do, I think. Even the city. Even me." Daenerys was quiet for a moment, watching sunlight flicker through the leaves. "There are days when I think of the eggs," she admitted, her voice soft. "I wonder what might come if they ever hatched." Sansa's gaze met hers. "Would you want that? To see dragons over Westeros again?" Daenerys answered with the honesty that had become her shield. "Only if they were born into a world that no longer needs them for war. Not as weapons, but as wonders." A hush fell. The wind carried the distant ring of the smith's hammers, the cry of gulls, the laughter of children. It was the music of a city content to be alive. The council chamber that afternoon was full. The walls hung with banners from every corner of the realm. The Kraken of Pike, the Trout of River Run, the Golden Rose of Highgarden, the Sun and Spear of Dorne. Gendry Baratheon arrived late, still dressed in a smith's apron, apologizing with a sheepish grin as he took his seat. Even the most serious debates, of roads, of taxes, of a new irrigation canal in the Crownlands, were tempered with the easy grace of people learning, finally, how to listen. Tyrion brought up the question of the vault beneath the Red Keep. "Every moon, the rumors grow wilder," he said. "And every bard in Fleabottom claims his father once saw a dragon egg rolling down the street." Brienne cleared her throat. "No one has breached the vault. The guards are loyal and the Queen's word holds. Let them tell stories. It's better than the truth for now." Sansa nodded. "Let them imagine. Let them hope or fear. We will decide when the world is ready what should become of the eggs." "Then tell." Sir Davos eyed her shrewdly. "And if the world is never ready, Your Grace?" Sansa's lips curved. "Then let the eggs remain as they are. Promises, not threats." Daenerys listened, saying nothing. But her eyes lingered on Tyrion's thoughtful face, on the old scars that never truly faded. The meeting moved on, dissolving into laughter as Gendry presented a cask of his latest brew. The council toasted the Queen, the city, and the peace that had become precious as gold. The sun set in a blaze of pink and amber. Market fires sprang up, painting shifting shadows on the walls. The city pulsed with life. Lanterns drifted down the Blackwater in memory of those lost, but also as thanks for survival. The river, which had run choked with bodies and ash, now carried only light and song. In a small sunlit square, Daenerys gathered orphans for a lesson in Valyrian. The children were bright and eager, their questions tumbling over one another. She showed them old coins and bits of pottery she had found in the city's ruins. Westeros is full of lost things, she told them, but that means it is always full of new beginnings. The smallest girl, whose father had died in the fire, pressed a flower into Daenerys' hand and whispered, "You're our dragon now." Daenerys embraced her, heart heavy and light at once. Elsewhere, Arya's letters arrived from distant shores, each more fantastic than the last. Tales of islands where birds spoke in riddles, jungles where silver monkeys watched from the trees, mountains that glowed with fire at dusk. Gendry read them aloud in the council room, and laughter always followed. Jon Snow rode into the city before midsummer, his beard flecked with gray, Ghost still at his side. He had the bearing of a man who had found peace, if not forgetfulness. He spent long evenings with Sansa and Daenerys, sitting beneath a heart tree as dusk deepened. They spoke little of the past, but much of the North, of the Wall's new role as a place of learning, not punishment. Jon never stayed long, but each visit seemed to steady him and the city. On the eve of the Midsummer Festival, a hush fell over King's Landing. Word had spread that Drogon would fly that night, and people poured into the streets to watch. Even those who once feared the beast now gathered with hope, believing his passing brought luck for the harvest. As the first stars kindled, Daenerys climbed the old steps to the top of the ruined sept. The stones there were blackened and half melted, but the air was cool and clean. Drogon landed with a shuddering grace, his vast wings folding, his eyes soft as he bent his head for her touch. The people below sent up a cheer. Daenerys leaned close and whispered in the tongue of old Valyria, and Drogon loosed a single gout of blue flame into the sky. The flame did not fall. It rose and shattered into sparks, reflected 1,000-fold in the river's waters. For a moment, King's Landing glowed as if touched by the aurora. Sansa joined her there, and together they watched as lanterns drifted on the river, and children's voices sang from the bridges. Gendry and Tyrion toasted from a nearby roof, Davos laughing beside them. Jon lingered with the people, Ghost surrounded by adoring children. All of it was peace, fragile but real, as bright as any fire. "Do you ever regret it?" Daenerys asked, voice carrying softly. Sansa watched the city, her city, every day. "But never as much as I would regret losing this." Below, the city rang with music and life. For the first time since she was a girl, Sansa felt truly at home. In the vault beneath the Red Keep, the dragon egg slept on. Sometimes the guards felt the pulse of heat through the stones, and sometimes, when the world was quiet, a low thrum, like a distant heartbeat, filled the silence. Sansa's edict held. The vault would remain sealed. The eggs belonged not to one queen, nor to any throne, but to the promise of Westeros itself. That night, as the bells of King's Landing tolled for midsummer, a light breeze stirred the city, carrying with it the mingled scents of honeysuckle and hope. In every alley, behind every window, people believed, if only for a night, that peace could last. Far to the west, Arya sailed into the unknown, her heart full of wild lands and the memory of home. In the far north, Jon Snow gazed at the dancing lights in the sky, thinking of all he had lost and of the family who remained. Drogon watched over the hills, keeper of secrets, and Daenerys slept soundly, dreaming not of fire or fear, but of a world where wonder was enough. King's Landing endured, bright and unbroken, and the future for once was theirs to shape. Midsummer's night faded slow and gentle over King's Landing, the dawn a faint lavender across the rooftops and alleys. In the hush before sunrise, the city was suspended between dreams and waking, the old hurts buried for a moment beneath the hush of doves and the distant lull of the black water. It was in such moments, rare, quiet, golden, that Sansa Stark liked to rise and walk the highest towers of the Red Keep alone, the city and river at her feet, her crown left forgotten on her writing desk. The bells, cool from the night air, had not yet rung. All across the city, Festival lanterns hung limp in the morning breeze, and merchants slept with their ledgers clutched to their chests. The square below the keep was a chaos of abandoned garlands, spilled honey cake, and lost ribbons. But no bodies, no soldiers, no fearful knots of refugees. Nothing left from the days when dragons and fire had been answers to every question. Sansa drew in a long breath. The city was healing, and so, slowly, was she. On the parapet, she met Tyrion, who, if truth be told, never seemed to sleep on nights of celebration. He looked up from a battered flask, eyes half shut against the new sun. "Your Grace?" he greeted her, raising the flask. "It's not wine before you ask. Only water. I'm told one should pace oneself after a night like last." "Menshauer. You'll spoil your legend," Sansa teased. "The small folk already suspect you of being a secret septon." Tyrion grinned, bowing low. "May they never discover the truth, or I shall be forced to become genuinely pious." What a fate. They stood together as the sun climbed. Silence between them, as companionable as any old song. Below, city life stirred. Bakers at their ovens, fishermen mending nets. The faint jingle of distant bells, as the first of the morning's carts rolled out through the Dragon Gate, toward the fields. Sansa watched, her heart oddly light. "You know," she said. "Sometimes I think the city breathes with me. When I am afraid, it shivers. When I am hopeful, it grows bold. Do you ever feel it?" Tyrion nodded, unexpectedly solemn. The city has always known the measure of its rulers, whether they wished it or not. Your father, for all his northern frost, inspired loyalty. Cersei, for all her fire, sowed fear. You, he paused, searching for the right word. You've made them one belong. She turned to him. And you? Where do you belong, Tyrion? No. He shrugged, looking down at the half-wild garden that now sprawled over the keep's lower courtyards. Here. Among those who would rather build than burn. By noon, the city thrummed again. Banners were taken down and folded, festival booths packed away, but laughter still laced the air. Children darted between carts and market stalls, some with painted faces, others with pockets full of festival sweets. The old lords and new merchants dined together at the riverside, trading boasts and bargains. Brienne of Tarth was spotted on the practice yard, a flock of would-be squires trailing behind her, earnest as ducklings. Davos Seaworth found Sansa in the council chamber, a clutch of letters in hand, his face grave but satisfied. The Arbor's ships are sighted at the mouth of the river, Your Grace, he said. And the Reach sends word that the summer harvest will be the richest in years. Sansa studied his face, ever searching for the catch. And the north? A letter from Bran. All is well. No sign of trouble from beyond the wall. Jon writes too. Ghost is fat as a bear and twice as spoiled. Benderol. She smiled, holding the letters a moment longer before tucking them away. We'll read them at supper. Let the city share in good news for once. Davos inclined his head. And the eggs? The question lingered. Sansa's gaze drifted to the window, where the Red Keep's shadow fell across the rooftops. They sleep, Sir Davos. As long as peace holds, they will sleep. Deep in the vaults beneath the Red Keep, the 3 eggs waited. The guards assigned to the passage kept careful watch, though it was said that in the deepest hours, even the bravest among them felt the thrum of heat in the stone, a pulse not unlike a heartbeat. The old stories had grown, as stories do, curling outward into legend. Some whispered that the eggs would hatch only for the worthy, others that they dreamed the future of the realm, and some quietly, superstitiously, lit candles and left sweet cakes for the slumbering dragons just in case. Daenerys visited the vault rarely, and always alone. On this day, after the council met, and the city had taken its fill of celebration, she descended the winding steps. Torch in hand, her footsteps echoing. The heavy iron door opened with a groan, and Daenerys entered, setting the torch in its sconce. The eggs rested on their bed of old velvet, colors shifting faintly in the darkness. Red and gold and blue, their shells shimmered with life just beneath the surface. Daenerys knelt, reaching out to press her palm gently against the largest egg. "I was a mother once," she whispered, her words for the stone alone, "and a queen. I learned too late how power burns when you try to hold it tight. But I know this now. You will wake only for mercy, not for rage. Only for hope, not for fear." A gentle warmth spread through her hand, the egg's surface pulsing in time with her heartbeat. She smiled, tears prickling at the corners of her eyes, then stood and left the vault as silent as she had entered. That afternoon, Gendry and Tyrion gathered a knot of city children at the steps of the Old Sept for a storytelling contest. The small folk had come to adore the Queen's Council, their sessions sometimes public, sometimes raucous, but always open to anyone bold enough to bring a question or a joke. Today's tales were of dragons and wolves, of storms at sea, and one girl, tiny, fierce, eyes flashing like wildfire, told a story of a queen who could talk to trees. She won a honey cake and a seat beside Sansa at supper. As the sun set, Sansa dined in the garden with her council, and as many children as the tables could hold. Jon's letter was read aloud, Arya's latest missive, written from a city where the moon looked purple, brought laughter and applause. The people of King's Landing felt, for the first time in memory, that they belonged not just to a city, but to each other. Brienne made a toast, awkward, heartfelt, direct as an arrow, to those who build, and to the peace we choose, day after day. Daenerys sat at the far end of the table, smiling quietly, the shadows around her softening. When the first lanterns were lit and music began, she rose and walked out among the stalls and booths, letting herself be one more soul in a city remade. Drogon circled the city that night, vast wings silent against the stars. Some said his shadow was a blessing, others that it was the city's secret shield. Below, the festival's last lanterns floated down the river, and the Red Keep glowed with firelight and laughter. Beneath it all, the dragon egg slept on, ancient and patient, warmed by a peace as fragile as new leaves, as steady as the tides. And while no one knew what the future would bring, all across the city people lay down to rest with hope in their hearts, a hope that fluttered and grew with the coming dawn, as if the city itself had learned to dream at last.